After 13 consecutive nights of bombardment and talk of a massive attack, on Friday the US suddenly suspended its latest campaign against Iran. Trump himself is yet to provide an explanation. All we've got since is a series of weird AI-generated images of Iranian things exploding on Truth Social. But it's hard to see this as anything apart from another case of Trump chickening out. So in this video, we're going to talk about what happened, explain why Trump might have pulled back, and what this means for US-Iran negotiations going forward. We believe that the owner of a news organization determines the stories that they're allowed to tell. So that's why we still own the whole company, have no outside investors, no private equity, and no outside interests. Find out more about what we believe in our official manifesto. It's linked in the description of every one of our videos. So let's start with a quick recap of what happened over the last couple of days. This latest wave of fighting kicked off on July 7th, and the proximate cause was an ongoing disagreement over how the Strait of Hormuz should be handled, which has never been fully resolved. In the recently agreed Memorandum of Understanding, or MOU, Iran agreed to stop imposing tolls during the 60-day ceasefire, and to, quote, take steps to ensure that the movement of merchant ships is resumed within 30 days, to the pre-war volume, taking into account the need for the removal of technical obstacles and the neutralizations of mines by Iran. The two sides seem to have interpreted this clause very differently, though. In his Truth Social post announcing the deal, for instance, Trump talks about a toll-free opening of the Strait of Hormuz, and told the New York Times that the strait would be, quote, permanently toll-free. The Iranians apparently interpreted this clause quite differently. In an interview with state media, for instance, Iran's foreign minister claimed that, under the MOU, future management of the waterway will be different from the past, and that services there will no longer be free. In essence, it sounds like Iran nominally agreed not to impose tolls, but instead planned to charge quote-unquote service fees, essentially just rebranding the existing toll system. Unsurprisingly, this fudge proved somewhat unstable, and almost immediately after the MOU was signed, Iran and the US started arguing over how ships should pass through the strait. Even if it wasn't charging tolls, Iran wanted ships to continue passing through Qeshm and Iraq, while the US instead started encouraging ships to basically use the other side of the strait and just hug the Omani coastline. Anyway, this was the proximate cause for the recent resumption of hostilities. Iran apparently hit a handful of commercial ships hugging the Omani coastline, triggering a military reaction from the US and the reimposition of the US naval blockade of Iran. Iran originally retaliated with drone and missile attacks against US naval assets in and around the strait, but things escalated on July 11th, when the US expanded its strike campaign to infrastructure and other targets deep in southern Iran, having previously focused its strikes on targets nearer the coast. Iran responded by targeting more commercial ships using the Omani route through the strait, as well as US military assets in nearby Gulf countries, including Iraq, Bahrain, Kuwait, and Jordan, which killed 4 US service members and injured tens more. Interestingly, the Pentagon originally included these on its list of casualties during the war, but then removed them, apparently on the grounds that they technically occurred after the ceasefire, which means, according to the Pentagon, they weren't part of the war in Iran. Unsurprisingly, this provoked further strikes from the US, which invited further strikes from Iran too. This was all accompanied by some furiously hawkish rhetoric, with Trump describing the Iranians as sick people, and once again threatening to, quote, finish the job. As recently as Thursday, Trump was telling Axios that he was considering a massive attack, bigger than ever before, that the US was all set for it, and that, in his mind, the Iranians haven't suffered enough pain yet. But then, all of a sudden, on Friday the bombing stopped. As we mentioned in the intro, Trump himself hasn't said anything yet, but there have been numerous reports that the US and Iran have restarted negotiations via Oman in an attempt to sort out a way through the Strait of Hormuz related impasse that we described earlier. Ultimately though, it looks a lot like Trump has, once again, and somewhat belatedly, realized that he can't bomb his way to victory in Iran. This would be consistent with a recent report from Axios that claimed that the US's top military commander in the Middle East, Admiral Bragg Cooper, recommended to Trump that the US should end its bombing campaign against Iran because it had apparently, quote, reached the limit of its effectiveness, with most of the designated bombing targets already hit. At the same time, there have been a number of reports that the US is running out of certain munitions. The New York Times, for instance, reported last week that the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff had privately cautioned Trump and Secretary of War Pete Hegseth that the US was running low on air defense interceptors. This would explain why the Pentagon recently put in a new order for PAC-2 interceptors, an older, less effective variant of air defense interceptors that the Pentagon last ordered over 30 years ago, and would be consistent with another report by the Washington Post, which cited an unnamed official who claimed that the US didn't have enough air defense or long-range munitions to, quote, safely sustain operations against Iran. Conversely, Iran has proved more able than Trump apparently expected to continue to impose costs on the US. Not only was Iran able to kill a number of US service members, they were also able to cause more chaos in global energy markets, with oil prices quickly surging to over $100 a barrel last week. This was both because global inventories were already running precariously low, thanks to the last round of fighting, but also because Iran and its proxies, specifically the Houthis, were able to disrupt shipping in not just the Strait of Hormuz, but also the Bab el-Mandeb, another maritime choke point between Yemen and Djibouti that the Saudis were using to reroute oil exports that would have previously gone out via the Strait of Hormuz. The Iranians also threatened to attack other oil infrastructure in the region if Trump followed through on his threat to strike bridges and power plants around Tehran, which would have pushed global prices even higher. Anyway, higher global oil prices obviously meant higher gas prices for ordinary Americans, which was bad news for Trump's electoral prospects. But war-related uncertainty also exacerbated some pre-existing nervousness in the stock market, and presumably contributed to the sell-off we saw over the past couple of weeks, with the S&P 500 down 2% and the Nasdaq down 5% from their mid-July highs. Again, Trump famously doesn't like to see the stock market going down, and this presumably factored into his decision to restart negotiations. All in all, this is a bit of a strategic disaster for Trump. Not only has he been unable to force any concessions out of the Iranians with this latest round of bombings, he will have also reinforced their belief that they can outwear the US, which will encourage them to take a stronger line in future negotiations. Now, this is a huge story, and I can imagine that you felt pretty helpless by the headlines recently. And trust us, so have we. And that's not just because we want a comforting story, it's because we need evidence that doing something still matters. You may feel that individual actions are meaningless, but what if we told you that as a community, you can still make a difference? Well, that's why we joined Planet Wild. Planet Wild is not just your usual environmental organization. It's a passionate community of over 25,000 members, including myself, built around a clear focus: protecting and conserving the world we all live in. We're more aware than ever that the world is a scary place, and the state of our planet needs to change. So every single month, the Planet Wild community funds a mission to protect endangered animals, restore our forests, and clean our oceans. The best part is they document all of the missions through videos on their YouTube channel, so we get to see what our contributions help to achieve. Examples of their incredible work span from training dogs to protect loggerhead sea turtles, restoring the cloud forests of Colombia, to turning a former fish farm into a beaver habitat. So where do you and I come in? Well, by becoming a member, we're directly funding a brand new nature mission from the comfort of our own home. With Planet Wild, you can make an impact without being on the ground yourself. Big or small, your difference matters, and you can contribute as little as $6 a month to help protect nature and give back to the planet that we all share. It's no secret that we're huge fans of Planet Wild, so much so that the first 100 people to sign up with the code NEWSGLOBAL7 will get their first month paid for directly by us. All you have to do is scan the QR code on screen or click the link in the description to get started. You can cancel your membership at any time, so there's absolutely no catch with Planet Wild. It's just an amazing way to give back to nature and create a real lasting change. And you'll never be left hanging as to where your money goes, as you'll be able to see the impact in less than 30 days right here on YouTube. So if you want to see them in action, check out their mission transforming a former fish farm into a beaver habitat.